Welcome to the Binge Eating to Food Freedom podcast for driven hearts and minds. If you pour your best self into everything you do, and yet food takes up so much energy that it pulls you away from what matters most, you're in the right place. I'm Katie Papo, and I'm here to help you create a healthy relationship with food that supports you to live your highest and best life. And for an extra edge, become a Food Freedom Insider. Each week, I'll give you free, practical wisdom you can actually use in your daily life and more. Just head to katiepapo.com/resources or check the show notes. Without further ado, let's dive into the episode. Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode. I'm very happy to be able to share information with you that if I had known sooner, this could have saved me at least a decade of binge eating, weight fluctuations, and so much frustration and tears before I got into this work of helping people end binge eating, compulsive overeating, and heal their relationship with food. I had a career in weight loss, and I was taught the same thing as everyone else, that to lose weight, you need fewer calories in, you need to burn more calories. So the solution was simple, right? Eat less, move more, lose weight. From a logical perspective, it does seem like this is true. Yes, there might be some nuances there, but in general, this seems like a true thing. And most of us have done some degree of that, and likely we've done that multiple times, whether it was a weight loss program like Weight Watchers, or we worked with a dietitian counting calories or macros, or we implemented our own food rules of how much to eat and what foods are good versus bad based on our own research. And we love research, don't we? So if we look back, we can see, okay, the first time around, let's say the first time I really tried to lose weight or went on a diet, right? You probably did lose weight. You lost weight, it felt good, until it started creeping back on. And then you gained it back. And maybe you gained it back plus some more. So then what do? Well, we don't want the weight to come back, so we diet again, which works, right? Until it starts creeping back on and we gain it back and possibly then some. So then what do? We diet again, which works until it creeps back on and we gain it back and then some. So we find ourselves on this roller coaster. And now the difference between now and then is it's harder to lose weight. It's easier to gain weight. It seems like we just eat one thing and all the weight comes back and cancels out all the hard work we just did. And it seems almost impossible to get down to that original lowest weight that we had. And there's a reason for this. There's a reason for all of it, because the answer is not what most people are doing. For most of us, when we can't keep the weight off, we assume that we need more discipline, willpower. I need more rules, stricter rules. We start doing more and more extreme things. I've had clients who have done medically supervised fasting, who have gotten bariatric surgery with very, very low calorie intake, who have done all kinds of extreme juice cleanses and weight loss programs and so many things. So essentially, what are we doing? We're just going harder. Like, we are doing the same thing we've always done, but we're going harder and trying different things that are just stricter. And when we can't stick to them, we blame ourselves for lacking willpower or for lacking commitment or lacking motivation. And of course we do, because we did succeed at losing the weight initially. So logic says that by doing the same thing, we should be able to keep off the weight if we just try hard enough, right? This is wrong. So before going in depth in all this, I want to start with an analogy to help you understand what are the hidden mechanisms at play here. So imagine that there's a machine, and every time you press the button on this machine, you get $1. Sounds like a great machine, right? So you press the button, you get $1. That feels really good because who doesn't want more money? But here's the catch. 5 days after you press the button and get the $1, it secretly takes $5 from your bank account, right? So you press the button, you get $1. 5 days later, you lose $5. So if you press the button twice, you gain $2, but you lose 10. So you're always coming out at a loss. But it happens in a hidden way. It's not in front of your face. What happens in your face is you get the $1. But the loss happens hidden, and it happens later. So once you understood this truth, how long would you keep pressing that button? And this is exactly what dieting does. Any kind of restrictive, weight loss oriented plan where you are restricting your calories, this is what happens. It gives you the initial weight loss. Okay, I lost 10 pounds, I lost 20 pounds, right? Look at my after pictures, right? That's your $1. But whether it's 5 days later or 1 month later or however long, the weight starts to creep back on until you gain it all back, and oftentimes plus more. That is your $5 loss. And not only that, but in that process, your metabolism is being injured. Your body is being trained to gain weight, not lose it. So ultimately, this is much more than a $5 loss, right? This is a huge, huge loss that happens every time. And I'm going to explain why. So most of us believe and are taught to believe, and it's in our culture everywhere, that dieting leads to weight loss. But what we're not taught is dieting leads to weight gain. And if you still believe that dieting leads to lasting weight loss, that's like saying, I'm convinced that this machine where I press the button gives me money. It doesn't. It only appears to give you money while actually taking much more from you in a hidden way. So let's go into what happens with dieting or restricting. So I want to break this down into 2 parts. And the first is the psychological part, and the second is the physical part. So let's start with the psychological piece, and we'll begin with a thought experiment. So let's say that you and I, we make a pact that starting tomorrow, we're going on this diet, and the big rule of the diet is we're not allowed to eat any sugar. Absolutely not 1 ounce of sugar whatsoever for the next 6 weeks. We agree, we say, all right, we're accountability buddies, starting tomorrow, no sugar, and the diet begins at 7 a.m. And then we part ways and we go home. What do you think we're each going to do now? I don't know about you, but I'm going to the store and I'm going to buy my favorite desserts because this is the last time I'm going to be able to have them for 6 weeks. So even if I wasn't craving dessert today, now I am, because I have all this scarcity and deprivation knowing that tomorrow when I want sugar, I can't have it. So I'm going to buy cupcakes and cookies, and I'm probably going to eat a lot of sugar today. So already just with this simple intention of starting tomorrow, right? We can see what happens psychologically when we experience scarcity or deprivation around food. Even if I wasn't craving it, now I am, because my body and my mind see this as alarm, alarm, alarm. There's food scarcity, which means you need to eat as much as you can now. Like think about, bears hibernating in the winter, right? They eat as much as they can now because they know the food is more scarce in the winter. So this isn't some character weakness that you have or that something's wrong with you. This is very deeply wired into us. And even though, of course, we know we don't need sugar to survive, we don't believe that that's necessary for our health or well-being. But It's this primal mechanism within us that drives us. Once we feel that scarcity, once we feel that deprivation, once we feel it, our hunger signals increase and we start craving and desiring the very thing that we're trying to restrict. And that's why, actually, and I go deeper into this in other episodes about trigger foods, but that's actually how trigger foods, very simply explained, come to be. Because we create an obsession around the thing that we can't have. And then we see it as this dangerous thing that we can't have. But then when we do have it, it's like we're totally out of control around it. So this is the psychological part where we're wiring ourselves to actually obsess around the thing that we don't even want to be thinking about. And that's just one part. Let's now go into the physical part, which on so many levels is affecting why the weight keeps creeping on and why you can't seem to sustain weight loss. So the first part, when we go on a diet or we start following food rules in some kind of restrictive way, or we're counting calories, not only do we have the psychological piece at play, but when we literally are restricted, the body adapts itself. The body's very, very wise and smart. And we don't think it is often because it's not doing what we want it to do. But really, we're just not training it the way that it needs to be trained for the results that we want. Because when we go through these periods of restriction, a few things happen. Number one, your metabolism slows down. It does this as a response because it starts to lose the weight. So the body sees this as, okay, this is happening a little fast. This could be dangerous. I need to hold on to weight for survival. So I'm going to slow the metabolism down to accommodate for this loss in calorie, right? Especially when we go on very extreme diets, this happens, but it happens anytime we restrict. The metabolism slows down. And not only that, but then your body starts to go into fat storage mode. So kind of like the hibernating, right? The body interprets this. And even though we're doing it on purpose, right? Of course we're doing it on purpose, but the body doesn't know that. So what it does is it goes into protective mode. It interprets deprivation, starvation. So it goes into this fat storage mode for your survival. So it makes it really, really hard to lose weight and really easy to gain weight. And it starts to intensify your hunger signals because it wants you to eat more and more. So what ends up happening is you physically are training your body to burn slower, to hold on to fat, and to crave more. And not only that, but it's going to create cravings for very high calorie foods because that's the way it interprets survival will happen the best, is if you're eating the high calorie foods. So this is already not what we want. We don't want any of this to happen because this is actually working against our goals. So what happens is we get that initial weight loss, right? Like when we press the button, we get the dollar out of the machine. So it looks like it's working. It looks like, oh, when I restrict, I lose weight. But then the hidden loss that happens, right? The $5 that comes out of your account later, that $5 loss is what's happening to your metabolism. It's becoming injured. Your body is learning to store fat, not lose it. So all of this restriction and weight loss is actually preparing for weight gain and to make it easier for your body to gain weight in the future so you survive. That's how the body sees this. So what happens when you've been through this multiple times? So let's say you went on a diet, lost the weight, gained the weight back, right? Because then the cravings became too intense and you needed to eat. And then you couldn't stop eating. And then the weight kept creeping back on, even though you were trying not to eat so much, right? And then suddenly you've gained the weight back far faster than you lost it. Then what happens in our minds? We say, oh, shoot, well, next time I need to go really hard. We go in with this mentality of I just need more willpower this time so it'll last longer and that'll make my weight loss sustainable. But really, we're just compounding damage. So now the second time around, going through a diet again, whether it's the same diet or a different one, the same thing is happening. We're injuring our metabolism further. We're reinforcing to the body, you need to be prepared to store fat as much as you can. And then ultimately our body becomes more and more primed for weight gain. This for me was such an eye-opening realization because I was doing exactly that. I was counting my calories and I would have the initial weight loss and I would feel so good about myself. And I'd say, all I need to do is maintain this now. But then inevitably, the weight would creep back on. And now there have been many researchers who have studied this and have proposed this idea that, wait a minute, does restriction cause weight gain? And it has been studied and it has been found that it does. And even statistically, if you look at the failure rate of diets, it's in the high 90s%. It's between 5 to 1% of people who actually lose weight from a diet and sustain it. Like that's a very, very, very small success rate. People who gain the weight back plus more is far higher, far more common. And I was in this camp because I would lose the weight and then I would gain it back so fast and it was so discouraging and it would be much harder to lose it the next time because now my base weight was higher and my metabolism was less equipped and my fat storage signals were alerted to be on. So I really needed to wrap my head around this idea, which is very hard for somebody who's had years and years of dieting and this indoctrination that dieting causes weight loss. I had to wrap my head around the fact that dieting causes weight gain. Because if I didn't understand that if I pressed that button on the machine, that I wasn't really getting $1 and that I was really losing 5, if I didn't accept that, I never would have been able to find my way not only to a healthy weight, but to a very healthy and peaceful relationship with food that's reliant on things that work far better than restriction. So what does work better than restriction? Now, this is where it gets a little hairy, and I can't go too deep into this now in the next few minutes, but I want to give you the most important things to know. The first thing I'm going to say is different than what you might have understood if you were coached by an intuitive eating coach. I hear from many of my clients who have worked with intuitive eating coaches that what they just say is, well, you see how restriction causes weight gain, so therefore lift the restrictions. Now, in theory, this is true, but in practice, this is not a complete solution because what happens, especially if you've had a very long history of dieting, just letting go of food rules is not a complete solution because what will happen is you'll let go of the food rules and then it'll be like it's always been when you get off a diet. You just start eating all of the forbidden foods and then you gain the weight. And a lot of people have that fear. Well, I can't let go of my food rules because if I do, I'm going to be totally out of control. And your fear is right. That is exactly what will happen if this is all you do. It's not enough to just lift the restrictions because your mind is still in that scarcity deprivation. So psychologically, you will still crave the forbidden foods. And your body will still get the message, oh no, well, we really shouldn't be doing this. And so we should hold on to fat because a diet's going to be coming around the corner. So it's really not enough to just lift the restrictions. What really has to happen is a phase of unlearning and relearning. And this happens on a mental level, emotional level, and a physical level. And really, it also happens on an unconscious level. This is exactly what I do with my clients in our longer term program is we go through this learning and unlearning process in phases. So it is true that yes, the restrictions are lifted, but that is not the complete solution. Because we don't want for you to just then be like, oh, no rules. And then you have this rebellion and everything feels crazy and out of control. We don't want that. What we want is for you to be healthy, for you to feel peaceful around food, and for you to be a normal, natural eater where you eat according to your hunger signals and you stop when you're satisfied. Now, when we diet and we have a long history of dieting, we train ourselves to override these signals. And this I could talk about for an entire episode on its own. But when we are in tune with our bodies, the body is the one that's doing the eating. The body's the one that's controlling the metabolism. The body's the one that's controlling what's happening in your fat storage and fat release. So really, we can't try to just manipulate the body. We need to work with the body's wisdom, or else the body will keep rebelling like it's already doing, right? And it's not rebelling out of trying to fight you, just to be clear about that. Like there's no actual war happening here. It feels like there is, but really the body's trying to protect you for your survival. It interprets the dieting and the restrictions as a threat that it needs to protect you against, hence the weight gain, hence the intense cravings. So what we need to understand is how the body really works, so that way we can work with the body instead of against it. So what my clients find when they lose weight, we are not actually focused at all on weight loss. Like my longer term program, weight loss is not a focus. Because weight loss, when it happens, it needs to happen as a side effect. Does that make sense? Because think about it. If you're focused on weight loss, what do you associate weight loss with? You associate it with restriction. You associate it with deprivation. You dread this torture of like constantly thinking about food and keeping it up and obsessing over what you can have, what you can't have. These are all of the things that drive the body into this more injured state where you keep accumulating weight, but you're not really losing any, or it becomes much harder to lose. So what we want to do is work with the body's natural rhythms and start relearning all of the natural signals that you had when you were born to be the leader, right? Where instead of the mind being the leader and saying, hey, you should eat this number of calories, we're letting the body be the leader of this is what feels good. This is what feels healthy. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. I teach just this part alone in my program. This part is 3 weeks long because it takes precise focus in order to become more in tune with your hunger signals again, or to be able to stop when you're satisfied without it coming from a place of willpower, right? So if you look at your friends who you go out to eat with or invite over for dinner and you watch them eat, you can see they're not trying to stop eating. Like when they stop eating, they're not saying, oh, I really shouldn't have one more bite. This is so bad for me. I don't want to overeat, right? They just seem to put their fork down and then they naturally stop. And what that means is they don't have this compulsive need to keep eating. When their body tells them, I'm done, it's very easy for them to just put the fork down and stop. And this can be trained in you too. This is more of the subconscious, like you've created through your past actions, like the dieting and things like that, right? We all did this. We created a level of obsessiveness and compulsiveness around food through the restriction, right? The restriction was the main contributor to this. So if we want to get rid of all of our compulsive tendencies around food, like those out of control feelings and the intense cravings, What we need to do is start rewiring those reactions in that relationship with food. So that way you can become like the person who just naturally stops when the body says to stop. And that's a relationship with the body that's healthy versus one that's toxic and controlling. Like, think about any relationship that you have in your life. Like, think about a partner who you have, or a best friend, someone who you're very, very close with. Is your relationship successful because you try to control every single move and every little thing that they say and every little thing that you say? Why is your relationship strong? Probably because you communicate really well and you trust each other. This is the kind of relationship with your body that will lead to the healthiest version of your body. Your body needs to be in a calm, relaxed state, nervous system wise, literally, in order to release weight. Like, this is a necessity, it's a non-negotiable. Scientifically, your body cannot sustain this level of health without a calm nervous system. And if you've ever been in a toxic relationship, and I know I have, that is the worst thing for a calm nervous system, where you're constantly feeling controlled or you're constantly controlling someone and there's no trust, there's bad communication, right? This is what's happening with the body now. This is what dieting has reinforced over and over again. But just because a relationship is not healthy doesn't mean it can't become healthy. Lots and lots of people learn skills and tools to develop healthy relationships, and they learn how to communicate better. They learn how to listen to each other, right? This is what you're doing. You're going to learn to listen to your body, and you're going to trust. It's not that trust is built on a first date, right? You go on a date. It's not that you automatically trust this person with your life. But trust is naturally built over time when you keep showing up for each other again and again with this good communication. So you can't force trust, just like you can't force weight loss to be permanent. But it can be cultivated over time as a side effect of really good communication. And then as that good communication keeps happening and that trust is built and reinforced, the body feels at ease and it doesn't feel the threat anymore. And it starts to release what it no longer needs, whether that's weight or whether it means the metabolism is becoming more repaired, and it starts to return to its normal, natural, healthiest functioning. And when the body's functioning very well, even if you eat a couple cookies, it's not going to turn into that is what caused you to gain 5 pounds, right? The body is operating very smoothly and effectively. And not only that, but now you also won't have these very intense cravings because your body isn't rebelling against anything. And you won't be obsessing over certain foods because you're no longer going through these intense restrictions. So you can be that person who we see, oh, they're so normal around food. How do they do that? They seem to just have one cookie and they're so satisfied with it. I've seen my clients start to have these shifts, and we just had a whole group go through this, and I saw it again and again, that the foods that they used to be obsessed over and terrified of, the foods they could not allow in the house, they would bring into the house and they would forget that they were even there. Where before they couldn't have it in the house because it would be calling to them. Or they could have a bite of something and they were just satisfied with the bite and they could easily move on to their day without any obsession at all. This can happen relatively quickly. Like this past group I had, it was only 10 days long, and they already were starting to see these shifts. And it wasn't the exception, it was the rule. So once you start to make these changes, you will start to see not only your psychology around food change, but you'll see the changes in your physical body too, and you will feel better because now you're actually eating according to your natural way of eating. And a lot of us, we don't trust that. We trust that if we follow what's natural, we're just going to eat forever. But that is not what's natural to you. That is what has been a reaction to all of the dieting you've done. When we return to nature, our nature is we want to feel good. So we will naturally eat in ways that feel good. I shared all of this with you because I needed to understand this. I needed to understand that what I was doing, all of the weight loss programs and all of the calorie counting and the tracking on the apps, all of this was driving my weight gain, not causing weight loss. And it was damaging my metabolism in the process. If I didn't understand this and I kept thinking that if I press the button, I get $1, and I just kept ignoring the fact that I was losing $5 every time, but in a more hidden way, I would have just kept doing the same thing and I would still be binge eating today. And I would still be struggling with my weight probably more than ever today. I needed to have this shift to give myself permission to get off of the diet and weight loss roller coaster and to do something real that could actually last, where I would build a healthy relationship with my body that I could keep improving and keep sustaining for the rest of my life rather than just trying to stick to a diet or a program. And this is possible for you too. So I encourage you, listen to last week's episode as well to give you further insight into this. If you want to work with me, I will have spots available within the next, I would say, couple of months. I don't have spots available right now, but I will update my email as soon. So if you're not on my email list yet, go to katiepapo.com/resources and I'll announce when I'm accepting new clients. And in the meantime, you'll get weekly tips. I send out tips every single week for you to start integrating these new ways of thinking into your psychology and to develop new healthy habits around food. So you can check the show notes for that, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you for spending time with me today. If you're ready to take the next step in your journey, become a food freedom insider at katiepapo.com/resources. You'll get free practical guidance and instant access to my foundations class. That's katiepapo.com/resources. New podcast episodes come out every week, so subscribe to the podcast now. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to leave a kind review. It's very meaningful to me, and it helps other people find freedom too. I appreciate you so much, and I hope to help you further on your journey. Until next time, be gentle with yourself and others. See you next week.